A billionaire walked into a showroom, and only one person understood her, a poor mechanic everyone ignored. One sentence from him changed his entire destiny. If this shocked you, like the video, subscribe for more stories, and tell me, where are you watching from? Let's get started. The luxury car showroom in Los Angeles buzzed with soft music and polished ambition until everything fell silent. A black limousine stopped outside, and the doors swung open with quiet authority. Ms. Hana Kiyomizu, the Japanese billionaire known for her private nature, stepped inside with an expression that revealed nothing and commanded everything. Her security team entered first, scanning corners, mirrors, exits. The staff, who had only seen her in magazines, tried not to stare. She walked with calm precision, her designer heels tapping softly against the marble floor. Without greeting anyone, she headed straight toward the rare vintage engine displayed at the center. Employees exchanged confused glances. They were trained for VIP clients, but not a client who spoke not a single word of English. Hana examined the engine carefully, tapping a part lightly, then speaking in Japanese with a tone that carried urgency. The words flowed quickly, but no one understood. Two salesmen stepped forward, smiling nervously, pretending to understand her explanations. But within seconds, their smiles froze. Hana's brows pulled together. She repeated herself, this time slower, pointing to a specific valve on the engine. The staff looked helplessly at one another, their confidence dissolving into panic. A wealthy couple, browsing luxury SUVs, paused, watching the scene unfold. More customers turned quietly toward the billionaire and the scrambling employees. Someone whispered, "Do they really not have anyone who speaks Japanese?" Another replied, "You'd think they'd be prepared for someone like her." The tension kept rising. Ina stepped back, arms folded, clearly dissatisfied. Her bodyguards exchanged looks, perhaps suggesting they should leave. One of them leaned close to her, speaking softly, but she shook her head. She pointed at the engine again, her frustration increasing. The room felt heavier, like everyone was holding the same breath. At the far end of the service bay, separated by a glass wall, a young mechanic named Daniel wiped grease from his hands. He wasn't part of the showroom staff. He only repaired vehicles brought in for maintenance. His uniform was old, his boots worn, and he blended into the background. Daniel had grown up poor in East Los Angeles, working since 16 to help his mother and siblings. He didn't have money for college, but he had passion for machines and languages, the kind of passion people overlook when they only see poverty. He never expected today to be different. He could barely hear conversations from the showroom, but he recognized the language instantly. Japanese. His father had been stationed in Okinawa years ago, and Daniel had learned the language from him and from late-night textbooks bought at thrift stores. A language he thought he'd never use professionally. He looked through the glass wall, watching the billionaire speak. Her tone was firm, controlled, but urgent. The staff stood frozen. Daniel felt his heartbeat quicken. Should he step forward? Should he ignore it? Would they laugh at him? He knew what usually happened when a poor mechanic tried to help. Still, the frustration on her face pulled at him. He dropped his cloth, took a breath, and walked through the door, separating the mechanic bay from the showroom. A few employees looked at him with confusion, surprised he dared to enter the main floor without being called. Daniel approached slowly, careful not to interrupt. "Excuse me," he said quietly. The manager hissed under his breath. "This area is for clients only." Daniel ignored the comment and took another step forward. Hana's eyes narrowed slightly, observing the young man in worn clothes. He bowed slightly, a respectful gesture he remembered from his father, and spoke in clear Japanese. "If you allow me, I can translate. I understand what you're saying." The entire room stiffened. The manager's jaw dropped. The sales team looked at each other, stunned and embarrassed. Hana's expression shifted instantly, from frustration to interest. She leaned in slightly, saying something in Japanese that came out fast and technical. Daniel nodded, repeating her words in English. She says the engine's airflow regulator is misaligned and the rotation valve isn't responding to manual override. The staff blinked, speechless. They didn't understand the Japanese nor the technical explanation. Daniel wasn't just translating her language, he was translating her expertise. Hana continued speaking, pointing toward different components with precise knowledge. Daniel translated every sentence smoothly, his voice steady. The billionaire seemed impressed. She switched to even more complex terminology, almost testing him. Daniel kept up effortlessly. A faint smile appeared at the corner of her lips. Small, controlled, but there. It was the first sign of approval she had shown since stepping inside. The sales team tried to insert themselves back into the conversation, but Hana ignored them completely now. She addressed only Daniel. She asked him a question in Japanese. "How long have you worked with engines like this?" Daniel hesitated, then answered honestly. "Since I was 16. She asked another question. "Did you study engineering formally?" Daniel shook his head. "No, ma'am, couldn't afford it. But I study manuals, old books, and online videos. I fix what others give up on." Her eyes softened, not out of pity, but recognition of raw, disciplined determination. The manager tried to interrupt again, clearing his throat loudly. Hana lifted one hand subtly, signaling him to stop speaking. For the first time in his career, the manager obeyed without argument. Everyone in the room now understood. The power dynamic had shifted completely. Hana stepped closer to Daniel, speaking again in Japanese. "I need someone who understands this engine, someone who listens, not pretends to." Daniel translated politely for the staff, but she shook her head. She wasn't talking to them. She was talking to him. She gestured to the engine. Daniel followed her, examining the components she had pointed out. He spoke softly in Japanese, sharing his technical thoughts. Hana nodded along, her interest growing with every detail he added. They spoke like two experts, worlds apart in status, yet standing as equals in skill. Employees watched with awe, confusion, and a little humiliation. A billionaire had walked in, and instead of trusting her with fancy suits, expensive watches, and sales smiles, she trusted the mechanic with grease under his nails and second-hand boots. Customers were recording the moment on their phones. One whispered, "This guy is fluent." Another said, "He knows more than the staff." The room had transformed into a silent audience witnessing something rare, the rise of someone who wasn't supposed to rise. Hana stepped back, crossed her arms, and studied Daniel. Then she asked one question that made the room silent again. "Would you be willing to work on my restoration fleet in San Francisco?" Daniel couldn't believe what he heard. He blinked, unsure if he understood correctly. "Me? Work for you?" She nodded. "Yes. You understand engines the way my father did, and you listen. I need someone like that." She said it calmly, but everyone felt the weight of the moment. Daniel felt heat rise in his chest, excitement, disbelief, fear, hope, all tangled together. He thought of his mother, his siblings, their debts, their tiny apartment. This offer could change everything. But he wasn't sure if he was ready for a world so different from his own. He took a breath and answered in modest Japanese, "I would be honored." The billionaire gave a rare smile, warm, genuine, and surprisingly gentle. Her security team relaxed, and the entire room seemed to exhale at once. The manager rushed forward, suddenly polite. "Let us prepare paperwork." Hana raised a hand again. "Not you, him." She pointed to Daniel. "He will come with me." The employees stood frozen, realizing they had witnessed something they would talk about for years. Daniel followed her toward the exit, still processing what had happened. He had walked into work like any other day, invisible, overlooked, And now a billionaire was offering him a future he never even dared to imagine. As the limousine door opened for her, she turned back to him and said softly in Japanese, "Talent can be born anywhere." Daniel smiled. The first full smile he'd allowed himself all day. He finally felt seen, not as a poor mechanic, but as someone extraordinary. The room felt frozen in time as Daniel stepped forward. The poor mechanic no one had ever taken seriously. His voice was calm, steady, and fluent in Japanese as he explained the engine issue just as Ms. Kiyomizu had described. One sentence from him changed the entire atmosphere instantly. The staff who once ignored him stared with disbelief. Customers leaned closer. The billionaire's eyes widened, surprised that someone dressed in worn work boots and a faded uniform spoke her language with precision. Relief washed over her face, as if she had finally found the one person who understood her. Henna fired off technical questions rapidly, her tone fast and focused. These weren't simple questions. They were the kind that separated hobbyists from true experts. Daniel answered each one clearly, respectfully, without hesitation. Every reply he offered showed depth, experience, and a knowledge far beyond his young age. Her security guards exchanged looks, shocked by the effortless communication. The sales team stood behind Daniel, suddenly looking very small. A billionaire and a poor mechanic were now speaking like two senior engineers collaborating on a top-secret project, and everyone else had become background noise. Daniel kneeled beside the vintage engine, tapping on a few components. He explained the airflow misalignment and the faulty regulator with the same confidence as a seasoned professional. Hana listened carefully, her expression shifting from curiosity to admiration. She had met thousands of experts, but none like him. She asked him to open a side panel. Daniel grabbed a small toolkit from his belt, unaware that the entire showroom watched his every movement. The panel popped open, and Daniel pointed to a thin, almost invisible crack that her team of engineers had completely overlooked. "There," he said softly. "That's your real issue." Hana bent closer, stunned. She had flown experts from Tokyo, Osaka, and San Francisco. None of them found it. And yet this mechanic, barely in his 20s, spotted it within minutes. It was skill, not luck, and she knew it. The staff stood frozen. They knew they would talk about this moment for years. Customers raised their phones discreetly, recording the unbelievable sight of a billionaire listening intently to a young mechanic who seemed like he belonged nowhere and everywhere at the same time. Hana stood up slowly, her face thoughtful. She asked Daniel a few personal questions in Japanese, where he learned the language, how long he'd been working on engines, who taught him mechanical fundamentals. Daniel answered quietly, his humility shining just as brightly as his intelligence. She realized quickly, this wasn't just talent, it was discipline, hunger, pain, determination, late nights, and a mind that refused to give up. People like Daniel were rare, people who succeeded in silence because the world never expects anything from them. Then she asked a question that made the entire showroom stop breathing. "Would you be interested in joining my international restoration team?" No one blinked. No one moved. Even Daniel froze, unsure if he had heard correctly. She was offering him a position reserved for the top engineers on Earth. He swallowed hard. "Me?" The word came out in English, barely above a whisper. Hana nodded firmly. "Yes, you have a gift, and gifts must not be wasted." Daniel felt heat rise in his chest. Shock, fear, hope. 1,000 thoughts collided inside him. The manager, who had scolded Daniel earlier, stepped forward eagerly. "We can arrange everything." Hana lifted her hand, silencing him instantly. "I did not speak to you," she said coldly. "I spoke to him." The manager stepped back, embarrassed, as customers exchanged satisfied smirks. Daniel felt the weight of her offer. He imagined his mother working double shifts, his siblings sharing a small room, debts piling up like mountains they could never climb. This job wasn't just a position, it was a future, a new life, a chance he never dared to dream of. Hannah waited patiently, giving him the respect she would give any world-class engineer. Daniel finally spoke in Japanese, his voice steady. "If you believe I'm worthy, I would be honored." Hannah smiled, a rare, genuine smile that softened her entire face. Her bodyguards nodded approvingly, recognizing the significance of the moment. For the first time, Daniel didn't feel like a mechanic covered in grease. He felt like someone who mattered, someone seen, someone chosen. And not out of pity, but out of pure merit. Erna turned to her team. "Prepare the contract. He will fly with us tonight." The showroom erupted in whispers. Tonight, not next week, not next month. She wanted him immediately. That's how sure she was about him. That's how rare his talent was. The manager tried again. "Ma'am, perhaps he needs time." Hannah cut him off with a cold glance. "Do not speak unless spoken to." The manager lowered his head, finally understanding he had lost the respect of the most important person in the building, and Daniel had gained it. Daniel looked at the floor, overwhelmed. Everything was happening too fast. He felt a hand gently touch his shoulder. "Hannah, you deserve this," she said softly in Japanese. "Don't let fear steal your future." Her voice carried a wisdom that broke through his uncertainty. He nodded slowly, making the decision that would change his life forever. "I'll go." The words were simple, but they carried the weight of generations. A poor young mechanic from East Los Angeles was about to step into a world he had only seen in movies. The staff watched, still stunned, as Daniel walked beside Hannah toward the exit. The automatic doors opened with a soft whoosh, letting in warm California air. It felt like stepping into a completely different dimension, one where destiny wasn't something that happened to rich people only. A few employees whispered to each other, "Did that really just happen? She picked him? Him?" Someone else murmured, "Talent sees talent." The poor mechanic they had ignored for years was now the biggest name in the building, and none of them had seen it coming. As Daniel stepped outside, he looked back at the showroom, where he had spent years unseen. Today, he was leaving it behind, not as a worker, but as someone chosen by one of the most influential women in the world. The limousine door opened. Hannah gestured for him to enter first, a billionaire giving way to a mechanic, respect that money could not buy. Daniel stepped inside, the leather seats feeling surreal beneath him. The city lights reflected off the tinted windows like tiny stars. Hannah sat beside him, calm and composed. "You will do great things," she said, "but remember this. Greatness is not measured by wealth. It's measured by courage." Daniel nodded, absorbing every word. Courage was something he had plenty of, even when he had nothing else. The limousine began to move, pulling away from the showroom. The employees watched from inside, small figures behind glass. For the first time in his life, Daniel felt like the world was opening its doors to him instead of shutting him out. He looked down at his grease-stained hands, the same hands people judged for years, the same hands that had fixed old engines in his driveway, the same hands that were now being trusted by a billionaire. It was overwhelming, but it was real. Anna received a message on her tablet, frowning slightly. "My engineers in Tokyo are struggling with a rare engine model," she said. She turned to Daniel. "When we arrive, I want you to look at it." Daniel felt a thrill course through him. She believed in him already. The limousine sped toward the airport, lights streaking past. Daniel leaned back, closing his eyes for a moment. Everything he had suffered, every struggle, every judgment, every night he spent studying, had led to this moment. And the moment wasn't just big, it was historic. As the plane lights appeared in the distance, Hannah spoke one final sentence that sealed the future completely. "Your life changes today." Daniel opened his eyes, breathed deeply and whispered, "I'm ready." And for the first time, he truly was.